Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast Magic is Real, where we talk about all things metaphysical and spiritual with a focus on near death experiences and other spiritually transformative experiences. I'm your host, Shannon, and I'm so glad to have you here. I really hope you enjoy the podcast. If you do, and if this episode specifically resonates with you, please would you do me a favor? This is a way to support the YouTube channel for free and help the podcast to grow. If you would just subscribe, like, comment, any engagement is really helpful, and I really appreciate you taking the time. So, without further ado, I want to introduce to you Elizabeth Hill. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello, Shannon. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you here today. And I just tell
Yeah.
you a little bit about Elizabeth. Her bio pretty much tells her spiritually transformative experience, but I'm just going to read part of it as an introduction. Elizabeth Ann Hill's spiritual journey began in October 2002 with the death of her identical twin sister, Catherine, and we'll talk about that more. Before Kathy died, she learned about a grand spiritual awakening taking place across the planet, which she tried to share with her twin with no success. After Kathy's death, Elizabeth began to have contact with her in dreams and through many psychic mediums. She discovered that she and Catherine had come in as social change agents and that they had made a pact to work together to deliver this important information to the world. Catherine assisted Elizabeth in writing her first book called Twin Souls, A Message of Hope for the New Millennium. Through this process, Elizabeth developed strong intuitive gifts and connection with the non physical realms. My favorite thing to talk about. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it's great. Great to be
S-
here.
So wonderful to have you. So, yeah, let's talk about your relationship and tell us about Kathy, and growing up, and perhaps something about your dynamic and your spiritual upbringing, whether that was none or some. I'd love to just hear about both of your backgrounds in your relationship.
Okay. Well, that's something I haven't talked that much about, so that's really interesting. My sister and I grew up in a middle class, what you would consider, middle class America, just mother, father, brother, twin sister. And we kind of lived in a way like the American dream life because my parents were both classical musicians and my father was a professor of music and my mother played in the San Diego Symphony Orchestra. So they were, certainly not rich or anything, but we had like a, a good life. And my parents got this home in San Diego, this beautiful, it's a historic landmark in San Diego. It's way up on the hill, and it has like it was built for an opera singer, a famous opera singer. So we grew up in this home with like this stage with the piano, and my parents were always playing classical music, and my sister and I took ballet and dance. Was our thing, and my brother was like heavy metal rock drummer. So it's just funny. A lot of music though in the house, and it was just this really fairly idyllic, upbringing. And we were cheerleaders, and the whole nine yards. The Hill Twins, and all of this. But the thing that's for me anyway, like I always had this weird feeling of still not really like fitting in somehow a little bit, like almost like on the outside looking in. Um, and who knew that I kind of had the sense, I'm on the road less travel, but it in high school and things like that it wasn't that pronounced. And then my sister, she did not want to do the normal 9 to 5 thing, so she went off and got a job with American Airlines as a flight attendant. She wanted to travel the world, and I kind of went more towards the businessy route. I worked in, kind of what you would consider corporate America, like different big companies. And so it was just interesting because, she, as a flight attendant, you barely survive. And I was, making pretty good money. We like kind of had this, we went in like completely different experiences where I was just, I'd just go like on shopping sprees. I wouldn't even look at the price tag. And she was struggling along, but she was living the dream, traveling the world. And so we kind of had these different paths. And we were the arguing twins. Like we loved each other, and it's let anybody say anything about her, and like look out, because Mother Bear, me, would come in, or vice versa. But like we were always bickering, and be like, would you two stop bickering, because it was just, I don't know, we just had yip, 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 and then so I kind of went the was more like conservative viewpoint. I'm sitting in business meetings talking about profit margins, and she's flying around the world. She went to like Guatemala and saw like the indigenous people. So we were really opposite, like in every kind of way, like politically and everything. And we were always arguing, and then not me, in a bad way, just like, no, you're right, you're wrong, blah 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 blah. And but she started in 1986. Our mother passed away of cancer, and that was a big turning point, of course, for all of us. And she started researching, like, what happens after death. And so she started, I was just more focused in just surviving. And but she started learning all about like psychic mediums and life after death, and what happens near death experiences. And she was trying to share these things with me, and I'm just like, just go away, I don't know what you're talking about. I went the more religious route. I became Catholic, although I never really bought into fully. I knew there was something off about some of the things that were said. But I got married, she wasn't married, and my husband was Catholic, and he was a cop, and just kind of like really different. And but then um tragedy struck, or what seems to be tragedy. And she was a United States Border Patrol agent. She had left her job at American Airlines, because the one thing about my sister and me is that we have these really passionate warrior personalities. Like, you look at us, we're 5'2", we were cheerleaders, that whole stereotype. But at the same time, I have an extraordinarily amount of fire and feisty passion in me, and so did she. So it was not a good fit, this flight attendant thing. So she wanted to go into some federal law enforcement, and she ended up getting United States Border Patrol. And she was killed in an on-duty vehicle accident on the US Mexico border. And what's ironic about that is that they were having this huge debate in Congress, right where it was the San Diego US Mexico border, right where she went off this cliff and landed. They were arguing whether or not there was going to be another fence, built there, the whole separation. And she, at the end of her life, she was reading all these spiritual books, and she's like, I, not that she didn't do her job and she respected it and everything, but she said, this is just ignorance, this whole thing about, that's your country, this is my country. And, very separation. She saw the separation and how this is just not working. It's not loving, it's not inclusive of all. And she was saying these things, and she was reading all these books. So when she took her last breath right on the spot where they were arguing yet again about who should there be another fence to keep the people out and other people in. So I thought that was quite symbolic, because she was saying, like, this is, not any disrespect to the Border Patrol or to her job, but like, because in this world we still seem to need that kind of thing. But I mean, she was like, this is, we are immersed in spiritual ignorance, this our whole the whole world. And she was really, and she had read about this. There's this grand spiritual awakening taking place across the country, across the world, where people were waking up to their true nature. And she was kept trying to tell me about this, but I was just like, I was married, we were going to Catholic mass, and I mean, I knew there was something not quite right with some of it, but like, I just didn't want to hear it. And so, but of course, after she died, then suddenly, I mean, can you imagine at 37 years old, suddenly getting and it was just so, like, I worked at the San Diego Police Department. I worked in law enforcement myself. I switched over from sales. It was a much better fit, because I'm my feisty, strong personality. And I worked as a reserve deputy sheriff, the gun, the whole nine yards. And then I was a 911 police dispatcher and did training for people, because it's a very high stress job. And I'm just one of those people that does really well, like in chaos. And so anyway, I was doing this job, and suddenly I was called to the chief's office, the chief of police in San Diego, which is one of the major cities in the United States. So it was a big deal, the chief of police. like, my God, why am I going? Did I do something wrong on a call or something? Anyway, I get up there and there's all these Border Patrol brass, like the chief of the San Diego or whatever, I don't know, all of them coming in with these grim faces. It's a moment I will, it almost makes me cry, but that I will never forget because they just said, your twin sister has been killed. I mean, can you imagine? Like, what? Because my sister was so full of life, before she even became like a border patrol agent and she was doing her traveling thing. She traveled like spent months. She loved like South America. She went to Machu Picchu. She was have pictures of her like horseback riding. She was really, kind of rugged, and she was a badass. And she was, you know, s- how could that person be dead? But she. So it was so shocking. And at that time, I was married. My husband came, and got me, and it just that was the turning point. We all have them, and I started to read the books that she had left behind, and all these books, and she had been writing notes to this guy that she knew. They were going back and forth, and it was exactly, we looked at the dates. There was all these symbolisms, like exactly 40 days she was corresponding with him and then died. And she was talking about, the 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. And she was in the desert because for some reason these people, they some of the people at the border patrol, they didn't like her. They were blackballing her, and she was just, there was a lot of stuff, really dark stuff going on, and she was trying to survive all of this. I mean, obviously there's probably worse things, but it was like 40 days she was corresponding, saying, something is off with all of this, and but I really want to know about this spiritual awakening. And then so I started reading all these notes. It was like a voice from the coming, from the dead. And then all these books that she had left behind about spiritual subjects and everything. So I started almost like to become her in a way, like I no longer was so, whatever I was, kind of dense, and not dense, but like, I don't want to hear, just go away. I don't know what you're talking about. And so I started to have communication. All my communication kind of opened up. I'm very, clairsentient, pretty much all the clairs, clairaudient, claircognizance, what's the other one? Clairvoyance.
Clairvoyance. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it just more and more, like in dream state, she was appearing and saying all these things. And then there was all these blue lights because I learned that I was very connected with Archangel Michael and the blue, and there's all these blue lights, and there's all this conversation going on about, Jesus and Paramahansa Yogananda, and there's a message and it's yours to deliver, and all this stuff. And I'd wake up and scream because there'd be someone standing there, blue lights, and it was just wild. And then all these synchronicities that she would make it known that she was still there. And I had never been to a medium in my life, and I was terrified of it because certain religions, they say this is bad and wrong. Because now I know it's just completely false, but I was so afraid. And then, but I had to, I have to. And this woman was so amazing that I went to, because she was this very, like, she was a nurse, and she was very, we put a big emphasis in the material world about logical, and but she was kind of like that. She's just like, I'm a clairvoyant, I'm a clairaudient. She just was very matter of fact. This is what I'm seeing. So kind of, it wasn't all woo woo with the, when you people think, oh, there's a crystal ball. No, she was hitting it. And she's like, your mother's here too. And they're saying they had to leave so that you had to shine as an individual. And you need to learn, what you're here to do, and you need to, become quiet. And I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean meditate? Yes, it's meditation and quiet and connection. And you have a big mission, blah blah blah, all this stuff. It's coming through her. And she said, when your sister's with you, you will see blue butterflies or blue wings or angel wings, which I always wear when I do, most of the time if I can, a blue butterfly scarf, because they're everywhere, like everywhere. The signs, the blue butterflies, mostly blue butterflies, but sometimes it's angels and angel wings. And I started seeing them all over the place. So there was just this, like, wow, I was sat there like, what is going on? This is, all these bells were going off in the back of my consciousness. Like, there's more to this story. It's not just your average story, two twins, it was pretty amazing. And so it's all these synchronicities where she would make her presence known, and then other beings of higher consciousness coming in different ways. And this medium told me, well, your sister, what she does is she connects up all these different threads and is helping you to connect with, because as a twin, you're very connected. And so I started writing this book. I didn't know I was writing a book, but I started writing all these things that were going down. And then later realized, oh, it's a book. And I called it Twin Souls, A Message of Hope for the New Millennium, about this awakening and what's no longer working and what will work as we move forward. And so, where do you want me to go? Just keep going, or
No,
do you have?
I was just waiting for you to get to this place
Yeah.
where I wanna kinda break this down into specific moments too. Um, you were starting to open your mind to the spiritual world and the spiritual
Hmm.
awareness. Do you remember when you first had contact with your sister in her spirit form? Or was there a first time, or was it gradual?
No,
And
yeah,
what
I
was
got
that?
it.
And sort of what happened and what did that, how did you perceive it?
Well,
How did you
you know,
know it was
there were
her?
there were two things that happened. One was that, in the, I guess it's The Shining, not The Shining. What's the one where the little girl goes into the TV and there's all this,
Poltergeist.
yeah, and there's all this staticky, that
It's one of my
staticky in the
favorite
TV.
movies of all time,
Oh,
actually.
okay. Well, there you go. What,
Yeah.
no coincidence. But apparently, like, as a medium, maybe you know this, like some mediums say, like when they are trying to connect, the being who has crossed over has to lower their energy, and then you have to raise your energy so that they meet.
Yeah.
And some of them say that they kind of get that staticky sound feeling or whatever. So I'm in a dream, and I'm at work, and because I'm doing my 911 dispatching, and I have my headset on. This is happening in a dream, and I start to hear this static in my headphones. I'm like, and I remembered in my mind, oh, static. That's like maybe, and you could hear it was really high pitched, and you could hear it getting lower and lower. And then it was her voice. So it was like she was coming in, and she said, almost, and it's not sad tears, it's just emotional. It's like she said, um, it's not scary at all, meaning death.
Mhm.
And she said, I'm in my favorite place. It's so beautiful here. And it was just like, I mean, there were just tears, and I woke up, there was just tears running. There was no, it was unequivocally her, not a dream. It was just,
Yeah.
they use the dream state because your conscious mind to shut up for a minute, So that happened. It was so vivid. Like, I'm in my
Yeah.
favorite place. It is so beautiful here. And the other one was, and then she said it several times, but one of them was, again, another dream. But one of the things is that she had always wanted to meet a man and have a partner, but she never seemed to, she was always, my sister, very feisty like me. So she's always arguing with these men. She couldn't get along with them because I don't know, worked in law enforcement, I don't know, maybe it's like chauvinistic or whatever. She was arguing. Anyway, she never could meet this guy that she wanted to meet. And that was one of my big sad feelings. Like she kind of liked that kind of guy that was like the guy with the Jeep and the dog and the driving. She liked the desert. I mean, I love the ocean, but she likes the desert. So in the dream, I'm like looking, and I see this Jeep going along in a desert, and is a really good looking guy and a dog, and then there's her, and she turns to me, like if I'm turning like this, she turns to me and goes, "Mhm." Like, I got him.
Yeah.
It was so real. It was like she was showing me, you don't have to worry about this. It's like, and the funny thing about that was 2 years prior to that, we went to this bachelorette party or something, and the woman had like a medium, and again, and this, or, psychic slash medium. And I was terrified because, like I said, I was told bad things, but my friends just like pushed me in there. So all I could think about was my sister constantly, because I was really worried about her. She was really unhappy. She couldn't meet a guy. This work thing was really intense that she was doing. And so I didn't ask about me. I said, is my sister ever going to be like happy? Is she ever going to get? And the medium was like, I'm getting 2 years. 2 years, she will. And this was exactly 2 years. So what that shows you is, sometimes you do get what you want, but it's not necessarily in this dimension or realm. This isn't even the real one. This is just like a shadow of the real. So she was showing me, like, look, I got it. You don't have to keep worrying about this, even though, who knows how it really works. But like, I was like, okay. And there were several other times where she came in and was like saying funny things, but those were the two main ones. And then during like meditation, I would start to kind of just get blips of, you can sense personalities coming
Yeah.
in, like you know, my mother. I didn't get that much communication with my mother. But later in 2006, my father suddenly passed away. So they all went, except for I have a brother, but kind of on our separate paths. But my father now, he comes in because he was very strong character, and you can feel the personality coming in, like, hey kid, like so I felt started to feel like I was being guided, like for example, I was going to marry my husband, and I mean my then boyfriend, but he couldn't decide because he wanted to be a priest. He was a cop, but he wanted to be a priest. And I don't know if I can get married. I'm just like, oh, for God's sake, I'm not going to come between you and God. You decide. And so I was so upset because I felt it. I was at the first hour I met him, there was this deja vu. I'm going to marry him, and he was took a lot longer to realize this. So I was just running on the beach. I was just so upset, but I'm just like, I'm just going to let him go. He needs to make his decision. And I'm like running. I remember I was running on the beach and joining a boxing club. Like I was not gonna be all upset. And I kept hearing like, "You're doing the right thing. Just keep going. You're doing the right thing." Like, oh, who's this talking to me? But I could feel it. So like it just started to be more. That actually happened before my sister died. Then I got married, and I was married for a couple years, and then she passed. But so I was kind of like, yeah, in that where like I started to realize that I was getting. It wasn't really coming from me, the personality, me anyway, information coming in. But those were the two big ones. And well, another really big, it was, I don't know who it was, but when you die in the line of, what they call in the line of duty as federal law enforcement, you get a full military style honor funeral, with the 21 gun salute and the riderless horse and the helicopters. And so I had to, my sister died, and it was 3 days, another symbolism. Three On the third day, I was going to plan her very public funeral in Balboa Park, which anybody who knows San Diego, it's like Central Park in New York. It's a big park because there were hundreds of thousands of people, well, not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of people coming because of a federal law enforcement officer being killed. And I was just like, I cannot believe what I'm about to plan, like my twin sister's funeral. Like this is just, and I was sobbing. And then this just lightning bolt like came in, bam. I mean, probably want to say God, but whatever, And it was like, your sister, I was worried about her. Where was she? Because, at that time I had, like I said, become Catholic, and she wasn't any religion. And what did that mean for her? And this lightning bolt, like, your sister Kathy is fine. And you remember what she was doing and saying and talking about before she died. And it just, what, my tears stopped, and it stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, wow. And so from that moment on, the grief was less because I knew there is something to this. She's fine. She acted more like Christ than a lot of people. She was helping homeless teenagers and doing all these things, like trying to help homeless kids get off the street. I mean, that's Christ like, that's Buddha like, whatever you want to call it. I mean, she was that, even though she didn't subscribe to any religion. So that communication was pretty big, like just stop me. So those are a couple ones that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that thank you for sharing all of that. You're right. When you have a visitation dream, it's very different from a regular dream. It's not just a bunch of stuff happening. It's very,
Hmm.
very vivid, very vivid. It's so real. I'm a lucid dreamer for one thing, but I've had
Oh, wow.
visitations, and it's like you see the person and you see them more clearly than you even see them in life. Like, you can see the pores on their face, you could hear their voice, like, distinctly. So that's really fascinating. So let's talk about this spiritual awakening and what you've learned in whatever order however you'd like to take it. Really, what is it that this awakening is all about?
Yeah, well, I started to read, all the books, and but then there was some other books that kind of came to me, and one of them was Paramahansa Yogananda, very strong connection with him, and his autobiography of a yogi. My sister was very interested in Eastern philosophy, and so I obviously, I went that way too because Paramahansa Yogananda. he has this whole ashram and temple in San Diego County and Encinitas, which is the northern San Diego County. There's a huge energy vortex there, and I had never been there. And my husband and I were just like driving one day, and we decided, oh, let's go up the coast. And oh my God, what is that thing? This big golden lotus flower thing. And like, so I went in there. I was like, oh my God, this is Paramahansa Yogananda's place. It's just so there were so many synchronicities around that. Reading his book, and now Paramahansa Yogananda, one of the things that he did in his autobiography of a yogi was that he felt to let go of everything and trust in God, or whatever you want to call the higher power, and go off on a journey. So that was in my future. I felt I'm doing that thing. But anyway, before we get to that, he just talked a lot about self-realization, and I started doing his lessons. It's like 3 years of study and meditation. And I mean, it's actually a very simple thing, but we make it really complex. It's just like remembering at the core of our being is God. I mean, like, not the God that people put up separate, but like life, the one infinite source, consciousness, whatever name you want to give that. We are actually that. We are not the temporary personality Elizabeth Ann Hill who came in as a twin. I mean, that's the, like, it's like being in a play, and that's the part I'm playing your part, Shannon. But see, a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with this, but like in the new age, it's more about, having these mystical experiences, and that's fine. I had some, but it's much more important though, and this can be a very, very disconcerting, very uncomfortable process. It's not love and light sitting on a cushion, like everything is ripped away from you, and all these things that we call the ego. I don't really like the term ego because it's overused, but like, this part of you that's very small and limited and believes that you're just this body mind, and you still have to embody that like I embody that character, Elizabeth Ann Hill, full on. Like, you don't, it's not a bypassing where you go, I'm just don't exist. These people walk around going, I don't exist and all stuff. It's like, no. In order to awaken to your true self, you have to actually really embody that ego, that in a good way, in a positive way. You have to be that character that you came to play, because there's a reason why you're playing that part. But at the same time, you need to understand this is not who I am. I mean, it doesn't technically, they say it doesn't even really exist, but we don't need to go so far into there. But it's like when you start questioning, when you start doing contemplative work where you're like, who am I? What am I? And you feeling that I am sense backwards into yourself, which I did over and over and over. Who am I, or what am I at the core? When you ask a question, you're going to get an answer. And so again and again and again, you're questioning what you really are, what this world really is. You start to have this greater and greater sense of I am, that I am not just I'm Elizabeth, the body, mind. And in fact, even time and space are actually illusions, which just simply means it's not as it appears to be. We come into the third dimension to have, it's like a school, and we learn all these things, but it's not really as it appears to be. So all of this started, coming into me, and of course, in Miracles and Paramahansa Yogananda. And then, so it's not just like, oh, let's have some mystical experience. Like, no, that's fine, but those are byproducts. But the awakening to the true being is a very confrontative, challenging thing. It's so we don't think that it's so blissful. It's not. I mean, there are moments where you're just like, you just feel that oneness with all that is. But so, yeah, this was the process that I've been going on now since 2002 when my sister died. It's now 2024. I've been continuously, meditating, questioning, contemplating who and what I am. And it all kind of started with Yogananda, because he was, he came to the West to teach Eastern philosophy and understanding. And he wrote this book called The Second Coming of Christ, The Awakening of the Christ Within You. And it's the most powerful book you will ever hold. It's 2 volumes, 1,600 pages each. What he did was he sat in deep communion with Jesus and communed the whole New Testament, what it really meant as far as like how Eastern philosophy is seen, and like a more expansive version, I guess, of the New Testament versus this really dualistic thing we think it is. And you hold these books, it's like, oh my God, you can feel the vibration. It's incredible. So that second coming of Christ is the Christ consciousness within each one of us, and that's what's happening. And people are taking on the most challenging things intentionally. We make these soul agreements, and you and Elizabeth Clark, you talked somewhat about this. Like, we come in intentionally, take on some of these really deep challenges. And I know that I did, and I can tell more of that story if you want, but it's like, it's not pretty. I mean,
Yeah.
but the thing is, when you're doing it, this is right. When you
Right.
fight against that and you say, no, I'm going to do it my way, like, you will suffer. And it sounds kind of harsh, but it's not harsh. It's like we are so protected and so guided. Like, it's okay. Even if you meet your worst fear, which I did many, many times, I saw like, wow, it's just like the Course in Miracles calls it a ring of, what do they call it? The ring of fear. It's just smoke. It's not even really there. It's just like so much fear because we believe that we're separate from each other and the world and all this. So that's been
Yeah.
the journey, the
Oh, thank you,
awakening
that's
journey.
great. It's yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I've come to understand too, everything you
Hmm.
said, and I'd love to talk about money because that's mentioned as one of the things that you've learned about, and I'll let you take it away.
Well, I met in 2008. I met a trance channel medium by the name of Glenna Dietrich, who has since passed away. She passed away in 2009, but she was working with, I don't know if you've ever heard of Robert Schwartz's book, Your Soul's Gift and Your Soul's Plan, but he wrote well, he's on a third one now, two very prolific books about how our soul makes a plan before we come into our physical body and the challenges that we agree to take on. And so he used mediums and psychics and people like that to get the pre-birth planning of the people. And so Glenna Dietrich was one of the ones in the very first book. And so I was doing my own podcast. I had written my Twin Souls book. It was actually 444 pages exactly, which I didn't do intentionally.
Wow.
Yeah, just my friend who was helping me publish it said, "Did you see the last page number once it was done?" I'm like, "No." And she said, "Look." And because my sister used that 444 all the time, of course, it's an angelic symbol. So anyway, I had written this book. And so I was doing my own podcast at the time, kind of thinking, well, this is how I'm going to promote the book and everything. And then someone else who was doing their own podcast said, "Would you have readings with all these psychics and mediums? Because you've lost so many people and you have so much craziness going on. And I want to know if they're the real deal," because he was making a website, this was many years ago, to promote them. Like, he had decided to get many different mediums and psychics and people like that and make a page for them where they could promote them. And I said, sure. So I did all these different readings. And one of them was with Glenna Dietrich, this medium who was involved in Your Soul's Gift and Your Soul's Plan. And I was like, oh my God, because I had just interviewed Robert Schwartz on my show. So it was like all the synchronicities. I was so fascinated by his book, where it's like all these people from the most challenging things a person could take on, and then realizing, no, but they did make a soul agreement to go through this. And here's why, the reasons why. I thought this changes everything for everyone. You cannot be a victim if you know. Yes, I mean, if you're abused, I mean, of course, there's that, and you have to address that. But still, ultimately, there aren't any victims. So I was just like, wow. So I had this reading with her, and wow, oh wow. I mean, this woman was extraordinarily powerful, and but she was like this, like, little imp, like a little elf. She was always giggling. She was just so amazing. Oh my gosh. And we just had this long session where she used like astrology, and she used um, like, her own psychic and numerology, all these different things. And then she's also a channel. She was also a trance channel medium. And so, like, she was just like, wow, like, people always say this. They look at my thing and they go, wow. I'm like, wow, what? And not in a very like, okay, like, this is crazy, this journey you've taken on. And so she said, you're going to be on this journey where you're going to be saying, but where's the form? Like, where's the form? Meaning, what is supporting me? There's like no form, because what is form is like money, job, home, security, right? And I didn't know
Right.
what she meant at that time. So then we had this whole thing. And at the end, there was a channeling. She said, okay, it's not going to be me now. I'm going. and she was like Edgar Casey. She was just out. She did not remember anything afterwards. And so these beings and these guides, they were, I guess, my guides, or the guides that guide the earth, coming in and talking to me. And I was like, oh my God. They're like, do you want to ask questions? And I was like, oh, questions. Oh my God. And I tried to ask a few, but then it was over and I couldn't stop thinking about this. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm like, I am a question person. I need to do this again. And so finally I asked her, can we do just that part again? And she's like, well, normally I don't, because it took so much energy out of her. But she's like, yes, I'm being compelled to say yes. So I'm writing out my questions. I'm sitting on the beach writing all my questions, all these questions. And then we did the channeling. And while I was writing out my questions on the beach in San Diego, where I lived, was this like a book title, Interview with the Universe. I'm like, oh yeah, I could interview the universe through Glenna. And what, because I always wanted some big guest on my podcast. Well, what's bigger than the universe, right? So you can have, interview with the universe. So like I told her when we came to do the channeling, and she was like, oh yeah, that's so amazing, I feel that, because she's wanted to use her gifts in a bigger way. So we decided that I was going to come up with questions. She wouldn't know what they were. And then I was going to fly to where she was, and we were going to do this quote unquote interview with the universe, where I would ask the questions and she would just be channeling the answers. And so I was asking everyone, like, what would you ask? And nobody could come up with anything. I came up with 250 questions. So all these questions about this new earth and the new energy and what's it all about. So we were going to meet in Minnesota, Minneapolis, near Minneapolis, and do this. But in the interim time, there was all these other channelings just for me. And these guides, they kept alluding to, there's a journey, there's a journey, there's a journey, and it's going to take unprecedented courage. They just kept saying this over and over. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And they're like, it's just, you're going to, they were never really said it, but they were insinuating. And it was like Yogananda, where he like let go of everything that we believe we need and travel only solely by your divine guidance and not anything else. And so that kind of was what did materialize. So we did our interview with the universe, we recorded it, and now I just have it. I was selling it as a CD, but now I was guided. Nope, nothing is to be sold. No needs placed on this project whatsoever. Everything has to be through donation, and you just give it to the world for the rest of my life. I feel people say, "Oh, it's going to be such an amazing book," because now I'm writing a book about this journey, but I feel I'm going to be giving it for free somehow. And then, because I just trust people always pop up. Oh, here's a donation all the time, all the time. So, like, and I don't have any control over any of that. So, what it turned out was they said, you made the soul agreement that you wanted to take on this energy for the shift that's coming in to clear everything. They said, you packed this life. And I'm like, geez, they said, you wanted to face some of the deepest fears of all of humanity. I'm like, okay. And Glenna did too, but apparently hers was about health. And then she ended up passing. And I thought she was going to do it with me. And then she left. I'm like, geez. So what it turned out was that everything went away from me. I ended up getting divorced. No matter what I tried to do for a job, like it wouldn't stick. And so money was going and money was going. And the only thing I had was this internal voice, and the internal guidance was like, it's okay. And I mean, I was terrified. It's terrifying because I worked in corporate America. I was like the making good money person, and the go-getter type, like they called me the Taz, it's like Tasmanian devil, but it was like turning the Titanic around because I had no control. It was just everything was going. And so what ended up being is like a Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda type journey where like I had nothing and had to start traveling and just leave. And everything went. All my possessions, my car, everything. And so I just started this, and this has been going on now since 2009. It's now 2024. I've traveled through 20 countries. I never know when money's coming, where I'm going to stay. I mean, it's not that fun in that sense. I mean, it's absolutely miraculous. And I'm so glad I'm doing it because it's such a miracle and it demonstrates many things. But it's not like any picnic, some people say, you're just traveling, enjoying the world, and other people are giving. It's like, no, it's really, really terrifying. And it wasn't just about the money. I was called into situations where people were misusing their power in the name of money, in the name of Jesus, in the name of God, Mohammed, whatever. There was a misuse of power. And then I have nothing to back me up. Like, people have family to back them up, they have money, property, right? Isn't that how power comes in this world? I didn't have anything. And then I'm being told, you march in there and you speak up about what you see happening to these big, powerful people. Like, and I was for a short time in the Salvation Army, which is a homeless shelter. I mean, who wants to do that? I worked in corporate America, but I was guided there. My sister was helping the homeless before she died. And so it wasn't just that I didn't have money and didn't know when money's going to come. It was like every possible situation where someone was misusing their power. Well, not every, that happens all everywhere, but like, I'm being sent in to speak up to these people, because what it does is it transfers the balance of power within me, that my power doesn't come from what I have or who I am. It comes from a deeper power. And God, it went on. I mean, it's still not quite as bad now, but it was like so intense. And I had no one to talk to because no one understood what I was doing. They're like, "What are you doing? Just get back to the US and get a job. Like, you're crazy." And I just traveled. And so, one miracle after the next, always in the most beautiful places, but at the same time, so it's like 50% absolute miracle and bliss and gorgeous places, and the other 50% absolute terror. And not terror, because I'm pretty used to it by now, but like, not things that someone would want to experience, with people treating me really, really badly because I didn't have money and I couldn't explain why I didn't have money. I was in front of a Chinese court in Hong Kong because I had been helping this other woman and overstayed my visa, but I did so because I was guided to. It was nuts. I mean, it was nuts. But I mean, so that was the journey. It was like, but it was a journey of awakening too, because like, I constantly was like facing my deepest fear, and then having to bring forth the only power that there is, which is our self, or our true self. That's the only power I had, and listening only to that. And they said, like, this is your superpower, the guides, that you only listen to yourself, capital S. You have the ability to tune out, because a lot of people saying really mean, nasty things to me and stuff like that. And I'm like, you don't know who you're talking to. And they said, we will be walking with you every step. Everybody does. Everybody has, guides, but it was, like, this is really, really important, because the biggest separator on the planet is what? Pretty much money, right? I mean,
Mhm.
everything comes down to money. And so my journey was to learn about money and how does money really come? What is money? And they said, there's all these fearful beliefs. There's limitation, there's lack, there's fear, there's greed, there's misuse of power and control. And so they said, you wanted to walk through all this stuff and clear it. Like, oh geez. Because sometimes it's frustrating, because I mean, I used to make a lot of money and I probably
Yeah.
could do it if I chose to, but it's like, that's not what I'm here for. So I just have to go with it. So that's like, in a nutshell, I've been traveling. I live nomadically, and right now I'm in New York City doing a pet sitting, but it's just so different all the time, and different ways that money, or not just money, it's like a place to stay,
Mhm.
comes, it just comes, and I can't
Yeah.
really do it. I can't do it. If I try to do it, it doesn't happen. So I have to just sit and like listen. Well, okay, what's my next step right now? Is there a step? No, there's not a step now. The next day there might be one. So like, I right now have, like, I have a pet sitting, that this pet sitting ends on the November 1st, then I have another one that ends on the 15th, and that's it. I don't know anything else beyond November 15th. And this is like how it is all the time. But, I've been doing it for so long. Like, I know something is going to come, but I don't know what it is. And
Yeah.
I
I
was guided
relate.
to.
Yeah, I really relate
You
with
relate
that,
to
and I
that?
I asked you about it, because I've always been I did corporate life, and I was miserable, like,
Yeah, me
exhausted,
too.
adrenally fatigued. It was so out of alignment with who I am, and I'm an artist, and I'm a creator, and that's I
Yeah,
mean, we all are, but
yeah.
some people
No, I
actually
get it.
really some people thrive in corporate America. My dad's one of them, and he used to say You have, and he's the best, and he's very supportive, but he comes from that old he's 83, so he comes from a different generation where he was like, "You need to get a corporate job. You need to do this. You need to make $85,000 a year or you're gonna struggle." And I just didn't wanna hear it, and then I found that, oh, I did struggle. He's so supportive. He just wanted what was best for me, and now he's very happy with what I'm doing, but, I'm in the same boat where I was in a lot of turmoil over never knowing where I don't know when I'm gonna get paid or what job's coming up next because I'm an actor.
Yeah.
And then so it's like, and now I finally in a place I asked you about it because it wreaked havoc on my life. And to a degree, you could argue it still does in the sense that I work every chance I get because I don't know when the next thing is coming. And so sometimes I'm not very available. But I love my work. And I've come to a place where I've realized that I've been so programmed, like, "You can't be in debt, it's bad." And it's not great, but I really had this big epiphany recently where I'm like, "I am letting go of that." It's just like money's just a concept. It's energy.
Yes, it is.
It's important, and anyone sleeping on the street will tell you that. But I finally just let go and said, "You know what? I'm always provided for somehow, some way. I am working. I just might not be seeing payment on time or in a time, but instead of letting that rule my life, remembering, as you said, I'm a soul living in a human body, having a human experience. I know my soul chose this as one of my main challenge points
Yeah.
to help me to learn something, which I'll probably have a clearer understanding of later. But what I do know is I'm being challenged to respect money and also know that it doesn't define me. And so what if I have credit card debt? It's not ideal, but so it's what are we gonna,
I
I
like
have
it.
everything I need. I have everything I need. And
Yeah.
that's really what matters. That's really in this life. That's why we're here. And
Mhm.
institutions exist, but they aren't going to rule my well-being, my sense of well-being or not sense of well-being, or take me down and make me depressed and anxious and lose sleep over it because that's just contradictory to our true nature.
Right. Right. I mean, I could tell you about debt because that was one of the things I made the agreement to take on. And just in a nutshell, my father had passed suddenly in 2006, and he didn't have a will or anything. So, like, I had really good credit, like really good credit. I had just gotten divorced. And so I put all of his funeral and everything on my credit card, and that led to me because then his estate didn't settle and this and that. And by the time it did, I had to use that money that came for reimbursement just to live. And so what that did was it put me into massive debt. And so this was the channel was still alive, and we were doing and I kept trying to get jobs. I would like fill out applications, because I had quit my job, which was what was guided. Then I'm like, "Oh my god, because I, like everyone else, believe, as a good citizen, you have to pay your bills, you have to have good credit, otherwise you'll never get a place to live or anything like this." And I was terrified. I was like trying to get jobs, and nothing would stick. And so we had a channeling, and the guides came in and said, "You have taken on the idea of debt for your whole soul group," and they said, "You want to, not have this debt because you want to be like everybody else, and you want to be okay in the eyes of the world." They said, "But we say to you that if you let this go, you will do your real true journey, and you will help many, many more people." And I was like, "Oh, wow." So what I realized was being guided was to walk away. 50,000 worth of debt. I just walked away. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should do that. If you can pay it, I wanted to pay it. The guidance was no, because it is an illusion. Debt is an illusion, like yes, our society, if you owe debt, you're supposed to pay it. I wanted to pay it, but the guidance was no, let go. And so I let go. And I mean, it was terrifying. It felt like such a loser, and I have absolutely zero. That was many, many years ago, way over 10 years. So I have no credit and at all now at this point. Um, and it's never, I said, well, I'm going to do this. because I feel you're guiding me to do it, but it will never affect me, and it never has. It's not touched me. I don't it's so I was actually intentionally given a debt that I couldn't pay and then told walk away because and now that's everybody needs to feel into their guidance, it might be depending on what you did in another lifetime, like, no, you need to pay the debt. So like I just did what I was guided to do. It was very uncomfortable, and but so not everybody, debt is not necessarily like something that you need to feel guilty or ashamed about. And I took it over and over again, like I'd be in these guest houses in Europe or somewhere, Eastern Europe or something, and the money just kept coming in. I had lots of donations and other ways that money would come in. And so I just kept, because I traveled for like 5 years all over, or 6 years all over the world, not by my own choice. This was just guided, just go. And then there would come a moment where I couldn't pay. So I paid and paid and paid and paid. And then inevitably it was like, oh, shoot. And they're like, okay, go into the people and say, here's my passport or whatever. I will pay, but I can't pay now. And they always said yes, which I wish that they hadn't, because I know that if I get thrown out of some place, the universe is going to swoop in and put me somewhere else. So it was really uncomfortable because they kept saying, when are you going to pay? When are you going to pay? When are you going to pay? I don't, because I didn't know. I had no idea. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. And they were pounding on my door. So it was like reliving this debt thing, like in England, in old England, they had debtor's prison, where like you were lower than the low if you could not pay your debt. So like I was somehow facing this, and I was so ashamed, even though I knew that this is what my soul is guiding me to do, to for this whole shame about not being able to pay. And so like I don't know, I mean it sounded crazy to me, but this is what was being given. And so inevitably the moment would come where the money did come, and I did pay, and then I would leave. It was horrible though. And then there were like a handful of times, maybe five or four, where I got the sudden guidance, you're not going to get the money, and you're going to have to tell them. And I was like, oh my God. Even though I knew I was doing it by divine guidance, not my own, but I felt like such an idiot. And I had to go in and say, I'm really sorry. I was expecting some money. The money didn't come. I cannot pay you. And there was all kinds of varying degrees of how these people handled it, from extreme fear, calling the police on me and threatening me with police and immigration, to like these Buddhists saying, "Okay, well, we understand. You can go. You don't have to pay it." So that's my debt with debt
Yeah.
stories. So it's not always. It just depends on what your guidance is. But, debt, time passing, everything is an illusion about this world. And so I'm not saying that like just get out of paying your debt. I only
Right.
did what I did because it just happened. There was no, I had no choice. I tried
Yeah.
so many times to get a job, it wasn't happening. So, like, if you can't get a job, it was set up. You could see that it was set up that I
Mhm.
couldn't pay it. And
Right, because
so,
this is what you had to learn. It's so
right.
interesting. I just find it really interesting because, yes, money makes our society work the way it does, and I understand that. It's a structure, and to some degree it's efficient, and in others there are just so many
Hmm.
people, especially these days, that are just not able to keep up, even people who have jobs, with just
Oh, yeah.
inflation. And so, interestingly, and I think it is interesting to have the conversation about money in the spiritual sense, because we talk in the spiritual community about money is energy exchange. Because a lot of us, as what they call light workers, I feel like that sounds kind of self-aggrandizing, but it's like, healers,
Right.
whatever, spiritual people, we feel uncomfortable asking for money. And
Hmm.
because we're like, well, we're doing this from our heart. We really care about this. And also, I have to make a living. And also, this is years of training, and I'm putting money into it, but it feels
Hmm.
uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
that's why I do think it's important to look at it as it's energy. You give, it's an exchange of energy that unfortunately is a reality in this world. But interestingly, I think it's interesting. I had a session with an astrologer who talks to people about money and their chart. And everything pointed, I said, well, I need stability. I need a home. I need to take care of my pets. I need
Hmm.
to, and she said,
Yeah.
that's really funny because everything in your chart says you're not supposed to be in one place and you are supposed to be doing a million different creative projects and not have stability. And she's like, instead of fighting that, how about we lean into that? And that's when it kind of clicked for me that like you said, everyone's path is different. My
Yeah.
path, I kept trying to conform my whole life. I wanted to make my parents happy. And they would be happy anyway, but they just want me to be safe and secure. And it was like, oh my God, this whole time I've been fighting against this. Like, I have to make money. I have to make money. I was raised to be conscientious and responsible, and I can't be in debt like that. It's, it's irresponsible. And then finally, after I had that reading, and she's like, "Look at your chart. Yeah, you're kind of a nomad kind of a person. You need to be free. You have a free spirit. You have a million different projects you want to work on." And she's like, "That you have to get used to the uncertainty. It's just always going to be up and down and up and down." And she's like, "Instead of running from it, go with the flow." And then I realized, yeah, just trust. Like just trust the universe. It doesn't mean lay on your couch and do nothing. It's
No.
do what you can to be proactive, do your best to pay off that debt because, yes, you don't want to take and not give back. But sometimes a medical bill puts you in debt for years. And what were you supposed to do? Not go to the hospital when your arm was hanging off by a tendon or something? Like, we just don't always have that choice. So I think it's an important conversation to talk about embracing the uncertainty and knowing that you will be provided for, that
Yep.
you
Absolutely.
obviously, it doesn't mean you will always there aren't people I'm sure there are people sleeping on the streets going, "Well, that didn't happen for me." But everyone has their own path and their own reasons for having to experience these difficult challenges. And
Right. Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I would not have chosen to not pay the debt. I was had it pounded into me that you pay your debt. But the thing is, as I said, I think for myself, capital S, and the higher self, the soul doesn't give a crap about debt.
right. Yep.
This world is a dream. It's a school. So whatever you're meant to do, you do. And I did not have a choice. I mean, I have stories about I had 3 jobs lined up. I mean, I'm a very hard worker. Like when I started doing like house and pet sitting, because that's what was guided.
Yeah.
When these people come home, they're like, "Oh my God, this house is cleaner than I scrub on my hands and knees because
So
I
do
do
I.
everything to the
Yeah.
best of my ability." I am not a slacker. I mean, I'm like a really hardworking person, and whatever the universe gives me, I'm gonna do it. And I ran an Airbnb for a year in the Virginia countryside, which was amazing. But I mean, the people were like, "Holy cow!" Like 5-star plus, and because I'm like so anal about making it nice for them, smell, essential oils. Like I would iron the sheets with essential oils, like killing myself. So it's not a
Yeah.
matter of being a slacker or whatever, but a lot of us are being steered away from this system
Yeah.
because the system makes it so that I mean, there's so many people that cannot pay their debt. And it's not because they're bad or they're lazy. It's like it's like the guide said that we play games with money on this earth.
Mm.
And so that is reflected in the fact that all these people can't pay their debt. Like it's a game. Look at the interest that they tack on, so that had I not had so much interest accrue after I paid for my father's funeral, that's not like frivolous purchase,
Yeah.
then I probably maybe would have been able to pay, but I had to live, and the money came and I
Yeah.
had to live on it. So it wasn't like an intentional slacking, like, oh, I'm just gonna go travel the world. No, I mean, no. So I had a friend who had kind of something similar, but she felt, no, I am to pay, and she worked her butt off and she paid it. And as a human, I probably would have liked that path because you don't feel like such a loser or something. But we have, my thing has always been outside of the box, and it sounds like you are too. And I hate being a nomad. I mean, I don't hate
Mhm.
it. I'm a free spirit, but I mean, I have prayed since this journey began, please bring me my own home. I love having a home, and I had, because I was highly paid, I had, really nice homes and cars, and I miss it so badly, and I'm constantly praying, could it come back? And so finally, like, in the last year or two, people even say to me like, "Oh, that just sounds so disempowering," but yet it is the most powerful thing
Mm,
to be in faith. And I
yeah.
finally just embraced it. I'm a nomad. I'm a house and pet sitter. Like it just the other thing that we need to learn. Oh gosh, it was like something moving over here. Oh, it's so spirit. One of the things that we have to understand in life is there's stepping stones.
Mm,
There's always stepping stones. So like I feel like I'm going through a whole lot of stepping stones. I really don't think the house and pet sitting is like my end all be all. But in the last 4 years, that's been my stepping stone. And before that, it was the Airbnb, and before that, it was other things. And they're never anything I think up. I just follow the guidance. So if you have certain things you'd love to experience, and you're going towards a goal, like you have to accept the stepping stone that's being
yeah.
given, because the soul doesn't care about the end result. The soul wants the journey, the experience. So I think, and these guys said to me, thank God they said this, there will come a time where you will never think of money again. And I've been asking about the home. Like,
Mm.
I don't need to own the home. Like, there's a lot of people on this earth that have way more than what they need. They could, I just imagine that they find out about my journey and say, hey, we've got this little cottage. We don't need the money. Come, live there. So something like that, because I'm not going to go back into the system that I was guided away from. But I am always asking about it. And I was thinking one day driving, oh, I want my own home. And this car drove by and the license plate said, own home.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I feel very assured that at some point I'm going to stop traveling, because I am 59 and, I don't believe in aging. I think that's just a total myth.
Mhm.
But, I'm tired. This has been going on since 2007, like, but I
Yeah.
do get like I did this Airbnb thing for a year, and I do most of the pet sittings I've done lately are 4 and 5 months. So I mean, I do get long stretches, and then right
Mm.
now it's one of those little short hops, which is exhausting. But I do get what I need, and I get a lot of rest and downtime. And people will say, "Ah, well, you should take that rest and downtime and go try to make money." Well, first of all, I've tried that; it won't work. And also, what I'm doing is quite exhausting, so I need the downtime. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm actually currently house sitting and dog sitting. I do that
Oh, are
too.
you? Oh,
Yeah, yeah, in my
awesome.
town with for my friend, but I do
Where
that
are
all the
you?
time. I'm in,
What's
Prescott, Arizona.
Oh, Prescott. Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
exactly, and then
It's a
in
nice
LA, I
place.
do that too, so it's actually a really good way
It's good.
to travel and to have a place to stay
Yeah,
and not have to pay the bills while you're there. So,
yeah.
that's
And I
really
use
nice.
people's car all the time. There's one pet sitting. I was driving two Mercedes. It was a 5,000 square foot house. Like
Yeah,
some of it is really luxurious.
it's not
So it's not
shabby at all, and
not a
you
bad
are of
gig.
service because
Yeah.
we who have pet owners and who travel need to have
Hmm.
reliable people, so you are being of service in a very important way.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so overarching message, everything that you would well, I know there's a lot and it's in your books. So, but
Yeah.
over what if there's sort of one thing that comes to mind, what you really want people to understand and know the most?
Well, you are, we are, I am infinite beings. We see a limited, finite world, and we are very bought into it. But if you would question who and what you really are and sit in contemplation, sit in that beingness, I don't know if you know who Muji is, but he has this wonderful invitation to freedom, which is he would sit and he would say, okay, for this moment here, I'm going to set aside the past and the future. And this personal story of Elizabeth Ann Hill traveling the world, whatever, the personal story, even the finite world, just for a moment, set it aside. And then what remains? You're still there's still beingness. You still are a being without any of that. Like if you were to leave your body right now, what would be leaving the body? The
Mm,
body, mind, character is just dust to dust. It's you absorb it into the soul and all the information, and you still have a piece of that. But I mean, you are not that. What leaves the body at death? So like before, they say die before you die. I like Christian mystics and their contemplative, like centering prayer, and also like the Ramana Maharshi is a huge one for me. His, what they call Atma Vichara, which is simply means self inquiry, which is that I,
mm,
just the word I. They say in Advaita teachings, non-dual teachings, that the I is the name of God, basically, because every being is like I. Who is that I? Follow that I backwards with your feeling senses into your being without the human stuff. If you can do that, like with intention, feel into I. I just use that word I or I am. This is what informs the power that you have in your life. If if you come from a victim mentality that all these bad things have happened to me and the government did this and this person did that, like that, you will forever be in that separated energy.
Mm.
People ask me, how on earth do you do what you do? You always end up with money, you always end up somewhere amazing. I mean, yes, you have many challenges, but still, how do you do it? It's like, because I know who I am, and I'm continually affirming. And I don't mean, I'm a soul. No, I mean like the actual direct, it's like a gravitas is the word. I don't even use that words, but it comes in like this weighty, infinite being that we are. We are all that is. We are at one with all that is. And it's hard for the human mind to wrap around that, but you don't need to wrap around that. Just say, um, am I aware? Do I know being? Do I know what being like? There's certain ways you can get to it, but like, am I aware? The mind has to stop in order to answer that question. You go backwards into the self and you're like, yeah, I'm aware. You feel the sense that you are a being, right? So sitting in that with that in silence is the number one by far, over any other type of, I mean, this is my opinion, of course, over anything. Because if you don't know who you are and you're caught up in the story of, oh, and I got to tell you, this political thing has really got me. But I still step back and back into the beingness, because everything is perfect. And
Mhm.
here's another one. I know we've got to wrap up, I guess, but there are infinite number of parallel timelines
Mm.
simultaneously.
Mhm.
And so the vibration that you reside in, mostly, that's the experience you're going to have. There isn't just one. Like, oh, this thing's going to happen. Which Earth? Which parallel timeline? So because of the selection and all of this, like, I put myself in this vibration, that the timeline that I want to experience. You don't,
Mhm.
like Bashar says, you don't change the world you're on or in, you change your frequency, and that changes the timeline that you're experiencing. So those two things. So it really does
Yeah.
matter your energy. Like if you're talking about all these negative things, I people, they just love to talk about fearful negative things. Drives me crazy.
Yeah.
it, it's like your frequency and your knowing who you are at the core, like that's everything, because it's so powerful and it puts you into another vibration. I don't experience certain things that other people do because they're so fear based. I'm like, I don't need to experience that, and I don't. So it is very important what you choose, and who
I
to know
love that.
who you are really, not just like the surface level stuff. So that's
Thank
what I would
you.
say.
That's great stuff, and I
Yeah,
wholeheartedly agree with you, so relate with everything with all of that. I just am not engaging with fear-based thinking, even though there's scary stuff happening. I
yeah,
believe that the more we feed that fear, the more it spiritually, energetically grows, and, it doesn't mean I don't see it, it doesn't mean I don't care, it doesn't mean it
yeah.
doesn't weigh on my heart, or that I won't step up to help when I can, but also for the things that I cannot change, it's not a lot of people think prayer, that's just a trite thing to say, like, "I don't need your thoughts and prayers." It's like, well, I actually believe that's everything. So, to me, when I pray, it's very intentional, and it is not I do believe it makes a difference, and that's why I do it. So, like you, I try to be aware without immersing myself in the fear, the negativity, because that's just
Hmm.
collective energy that just grows and foments more and more division, violence, hate. It sounds so corny. I would have rolled my eyes at myself years ago. Be love. That's
I
what
knew
you
you were
could
going to say
do.
that. Be the change. Be
Be
the
the
change. Right?
change. I know
Yeah,
it sounds so
that's
stupid
right.
to some
But it's
people, but
true.
I believe it. And so thank you, Elizabeth Hill, for being here. I really appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing so
thank you.
vulnerably. And really, I love that we're able to be vulnerable in a public
Yes.
forum. It's not, we're not on
Yeah.
TMZ doesn't care who I am, but, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's important for us to share our vulnerability so other people know "Oh, I'm not alone. We can talk about this," especially money. People really don't wanna
Ugh,
talk about it, sweep it under the rug, shame, embarrassment. That's rude to ask about. I don't think it is at all. It's one of my favorite topics because every one of us is affected by it, and I think we need to talk about it. Doesn't mean that just because I'm not sleeping on a street that it doesn't, affect me, or it doesn't mean that I
right.
don't see the person sleeping on the street. So I think it's really important. I think we have a lot of resistance around talking about it because we don't want to sound like I don't have a right to complain about that when people are so much worse off or whatever. We're all going through our own things. So thank you for joining me in the
Thank you.
conversation and sharing. And I'll have links to your books below. And I'm wishing you the greatest abundance in all areas of your life, and I know
You
that
as
it will,
well.
and I trust that it will all come. So, wonderful
Yeah.
having you as a guest,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me. It was wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.